Moto GUZZI V7 Stone Best Motorcycle Review. The V7 isn't outstanding at any one thing, but it's very versatile, usable and has character and looks. The Moto GUZZI V7 Stone is the base version of the second generation V7 introduced for the 2015 riding season. The original V7 Café Classic was launched in 2009 as a sort of Italian Triumph Bonneville retro roadster and has been such a success that, like the British Bonneville, it has evolved into a whole family of machines. All are based around the small block version of the classic Moto GUZZI transversely mounted, shaft-drive air-cooled V-twin, which dates back to the 1980s but has been successively updated since. This is mounted in an equally classic, retro-style tubular steel twin-shock roadster chassis which gives an evocative, pleasing retro ride that's accessible to novices and smaller riders alike, all at an affordable price. The 7 brought a series of updates, and again there were 3 models to choose from: the standard Stone, the slightly tickled Special and the Racer. Each bike shares the same platform, the same engine, brakes, rider aids, everything. Ride quality and brakes. The original V7 was a straightforward, retro-styled roadster with unintimidating proportions that particularly suited novices or women riders. With an old-fashioned tubular steel, twin-shock chassis and around 50 brake horsepower, it's no sports bike, but it handles easily and pleasantly, and the updates into 7 trim have improved things subtly. You immediately notice the roomier riding position, while the upright rider's stance on the Special and Stone is very natural. The wide bars, low center of gravity, light clutch and small turning circle also make it a dawdle around town. I can immediately see why inexperienced riders like it so much. The V7 may appear heavy, but it only tops the scales at 189 kilograms, lighter than a Suzuki SV650. I was worried the lowered pegs would hinder ground clearance, but it turns out it isn't that bad. The 18-inch front and 17-inch rear makes the handling stable and predictable, but certainly not sharp. You roll into corners more traditionally rather than dive towards the apex. Engine. As before, the 7 is powered by GUZZI's classic, small block, 744 cubic centimeters, air-cooled, transversely mounted V-twin with shaft final drive. It's essentially an old, fairly crude design dated back to the 1970s, complete with pushrod valve actuation and just 2 valves per cylinder, which is largely why it only produces around 48 brake horsepower. This 7 version has had some internal revisions, but power and torque remain the same at just under 50 brake horsepower. Instead, the most significant change is the addition of an extra gear, making it a 6-speed gearbox unlike the old 5. This means there's less spacing between the ratios and the revs won't drop as dramatically between changes. The experience, however, is largely unchanged and, although not especially fast, is flexible, rich and evocative. You know you are riding a motorcycle on the V7. It's a joy to twist the throttle and feel the torque reaction from the shaft drive gently rocking the bike to the right. There are vibrations, but that's what you get with an air-cooled transverse V-twin and is part of the fun. Reliability and build quality. Moto GUZZI has a reputation as being something of an Italian version of Harley-Davidson, being a revered brand devoted to a traditional engine layout, in GUZZI's case an air-cooled, transversely mounted V-twin with shaft drive that dates back to the late 1960s, and for producing slightly old-school style bikes with comparatively crude engineering, lacking modern features and with all the concerns for unreliability, dodgy Italian electrics and poor build quality, all of that brought with it. However, since the historic firm's takeover by Italian scooter giant Piaggio in 2005, improved funding and resources have led to significant modernization and improved build quality, reliability and dealer backup, so much so that those fears are now largely a thing of the past. The 2009 V7 was one of the first new GUZZIs launched after Piaggio's takeover, and the improvements are clear. Although the original's engine was still fairly crude, its build quality, finish and reliability were much improved. The engine was also refined further for this 2 version, with even better reliability a result, even though performance was unchanged. V7 2 owners report few problems and we've no record of major mechanical issues, especially if maintained properly, although it is worth mentioning that Moto GUZZI's UK dealer network, even under Piaggio ownership, is still nowhere near as comprehensive as the likes of the major Japanese brands, BMW or Triumph. Value versus rivals. When the original V7 was launched in 2009, it was refreshingly affordable, being priced similarly to the corresponding Triumph Bonneville. The same is true with the updated V7.2 version, while the Stone, being the base model in the range, was the most affordable of all, starting at just over £7,000 when new. This is borne out by used values, too. A decent, used V7.2 can today be had for between £5,000 and £6,750, depending on model and mileage. The blacked-out, more basic Stone is the cheapest of all, and, although Spartan in standard trim, many owners tend to fit accessories and cosmetic add-ons which can be a bonus when buying used. Equipment. Being a retro-styled roadster that is based on an old engine and chassis meant that Moto GUZZI's V7.2 was never going to be lavished with modern equipment or lavish luxuries, and this is even more true of the base Stone version with its cast wheels and blacked-out finish. And while mechanically updated and cosmetically improved, all of the above was also just as true of the second-generation V7.2 version, with the base-level Stone still designed as a fairly basic, intentionally affordable bike. That said, V7.2 is better than the original, and there are still some nice touches. Adding traction control to an air-cooled bike with less than 50 brake horsepower may initially have appeared rather pointless, but consider the natural environment for the V7, the sometimes cobbled city streets of Paris or Milan. Add some wet weather into the mix and you actually have to question instead why more learner-friendly or A2 compliant bikes don't have it.